All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's do some checks here and make sure it looks like it's working. If there's anybody in the chat room that wants to confirm the audio is working well enough, love to hear that. So this is a very casual stream. I don't have any specific agenda. I'm just in the mood to play around with Maui. Maui is the evolution of Xamarin Forms, and both Xamarin Forms and Maui are philosophically very similar to WPF. But this is going to be a learning experience for me. So we'll just see how it goes. The first thing I want to do here, though, I've already done this, so I know. But if you want to do Maui stuff, you got to come into the rerun the installer. And this right here is the component you got to add, the workload you got to add. .NET Multi-Platform App UI. That's what Maui stands for, MAUI. So come in here and install that if you don't have it already. It's not tiny. Let me uncheck this. It's 5.5 gigs. And so it's kind of big. Now maybe this is about the same. Nope, nowhere near the same. What about this one? Well, that's bigger than I would have expected. 3.71 gigs for C++ development, but ASP.NET is, yeah, like that one's tiny by comparison. Anyway, it's fairly big. I don't know exactly why that would be, but maybe it's because it's got to install emulators for Android and stuff for iOS. Like some of those things could very easily, just on their own, be very, very big. I don't know what's causing it. Like I don't see anything specific in here that clearly stands out as well. Obviously, it's big because of that, but who knows? All right, so you got to install that. It does take several minutes for it to install. At least it did for me. But once you've got that, then you can run Visual Studio. That's starting on my other screen that you guys can't see. There we go. All right. I'm just going to create a new project, and I was already into just basically this screen. And all I've done here is I've just come down here and pick the Maui filter. So both of these look like I mean, it kind of looks like the same thing. iOS, Android, Mac Catalyst, WinUI, ties in, and then this says using Blazor. I think if you're coming from like a web development standpoint, especially if you've been using Blazor in like ASP.NET stuff, this might be the better choice for you. I'm more comfortable with this one. And then this one down here is a class library. So that's if you're like building components that are meant to be reused in .NET Maui applications. So I think this is the one I'm going to go with. Just hit next and see where this goes. Give it a name. And this is the normal location. For small projects, I tend to check this, play solution project in the same directory. That way it just gets rid of an extra layer of folder structure that isn't necessarily all that helpful to me. So I don't know what we're going to get with this. I don't know if that's necessarily the right choice with Maui, but I don't know. That's what it is. So let's just see where this goes. The only option, tell the Visual Studio to make a new project from that template. While we're at it, I can probably close this installer. I don't need that anymore. All right. Well, the first thing I'm going to do here is run it. Let's see, Windows machine. So I've got an option here for an Android device manager. There might be something I could do to configure it to get iOS and stuff as well. But that Windows machine is going to be a good start for this, even if I intend to primarily target Android or something. Yeah, so I've got options here for, certainly for doing, they're paired to Mac. That's how you're doing iOS. If you're doing iOS, you pretty much always need Mac hardware, which I guess makes a fair bit of sense, but all right. I want to click on this and open this up. That's opening it up on my other window. I might need that. Looks like this got instructions for, I should maybe move this over here since I'm looking at it. You guys might as well look at it too. How to set up an Android device and some of those things. I'm gonna not worry about Android devices right now. I think there's a lot of people who, that's their intent with Maui, is I want to make, let's just run this and see what we've got, and then we can start picking this apart. See how long it takes to build these. We can do a failed to download package. That might prevent me from getting very far. Maybe that's normal. Doesn't seem very normal. I'm just looking down here at this message. That looks like a programmer bug. I mean, somebody's accessing an object that's been disposed. Shouldn't do that. It isn't just like a network error where the network had an issue and the software detected it. I'm assuming this is still trying to run. It says ready. Thanks, Wildface, for the audio check. Glad to hear that it's working. My play button is disabled. This is still animating. So I don't know if this is like starting something, already started something. If it is, I don't see it and I can't stop it. I hope it doesn't always take this long to launch a Maui app, because that'd be pretty close to a deal breaker if it always takes 5 minutes to launch. Unless maybe it's got good like hot reload, which it has some sort of hot reload, I'm pretty sure. Still don't know what this is thinking here. Maybe while we're waiting, I keep seeing these little errors down here. Maybe while we're waiting for that, I can go start poking around at the project structure. So Maui it's a cross-platform app framework, as unlike WPF that's Windows only. Post work in a whole lot of places. One place that has questionable support is Linux. And that was the intent of Maui in the first place, was to have Linux support, but I think Microsoft said, we are not going to provide that in version 1. We're going to let the community provide that. And I feel like that's a lot to ask of the community. Well, you can make it run on a whole other operating system. Just seems like that's a big ask. So I'm hoping that Microsoft eventually gets around to just them supporting it, or at least even if they're asking for, like, it's easy to ask the community to fix small bugs and to find typos and, you know, little things like that, that you can usually get the community to do that. But to like build, I don't think there's build a web app in it. To, you know, to have a single code base that you can access through the web or through your phone or through a desktop app, that'd be a really nice feature. I haven't heard anybody even talk about that one though, so I don't know if that's any chance of that. But so this has all these dependencies, but it might be like, I'm worried that I'm not getting these. Maybe I should start Googling that, but let's keep going through here. What else is in here? Launch settings. That's probably sort of the like the bootstrapping, the launching of the app kind of stuff. Okay, I don't know what this does. I feel like it ought to be able to generate this kind of stuff from something that's cross-platform. But like I said, we'll see what this means, but later. Just kind of poking around for the moment. Oh, okay, this makes me feel a little better. So this looks like there's a lot of, so fonts, app icons, images. These look like they are, the bulk of the assets are cross-platform. I'm assuming they're not in that platforms folder. Still building. Let's open this up. So with these XAML files, that's how you pronounce that, XAML, XAML. I don't remember what that stands for. It might be like XML application markup language or something like that. So usually what you end up with is you have a XAML file, which is, like I said, if you look at it, it is XML, like it's just straight up XML. And it defines like the structure of the UI. So like there's a bunch of this stuff that I could almost ignore for the moment. Like this just has an application. And if we come look at, say, main page here, there's a content page, and inside of that there's a scroll view and a vertical stack layout and an image and a label and a button. So like you define your UI using XML, and then you have what's called a code behind file, which is this, that is like somewhere in here. This is going to call out that click. It's probably on the button. Clicked on, counter clicked. So this guy will call this method here. Hi, Magisterium Emporium. Good to see you here. So yeah, like I said, if we could ever get this running, which I said, still thinking. There's a button that if you click on, counts the number of times you click. And it looks like it's just got this field back here, and every time you click, it adds one to it, and then it looks like it's updating the text of this button. Oh, something's happening. Deploy started. Okay, like I said, if that happens one time, the first time you use a project, I'm okay with it taking a couple minutes, especially if it's like the first time you ever make for like debugging. So there's a bunch of debugging tools up here. So that's not normally part of the app, but everything else in here we can probably go find in our code. So we were already looking at the code for this click me button. Oh. Okay, it is working. So, okay, that is the app. I'm going to set this over here in my other window for a second. But we ought to be able to, let's start at the very top. In WPF land, and I'm assuming here too, there's this app. So this app.xaml is for like, this isn't even the window. This is like the application. So you can define certain things in here that are across the entire application, regardless of how many windows you have. Anything that ends up in app.xaml or app.cs is like for that top level thing. This looks like, where's my Solution Explorer? This looks like underneath that, there's like this thing. Where did I see that? It was in here. New app shell. So I'm assuming app shell provides, let's see if we've got anything in here. I don't know what this shell does, but having done things like this before, there's a, oh, well, look at this. So that's the home right there. So it's providing this, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's a lot of just like little built-in functionality that this shell provides. Maybe for things like switching between pages or things like that. And like I said, I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but that type of thing is pretty typical. And that's just from the name. That's what I'd assume this is. And then this says route main page, which that's this guy, which is we were looking at this guy. So this is like all of the meat of this down in here. So it's probably everything from here down. It's got a scroll view, which means maybe if we make this small enough, we'll get a scroll bar. Yeah, there's a scroll bar. Huh. And now my scroll bar is gone. How did I? What? Why does? That's kind of confusing. I don't. Scroll bar disappears when I make it, and it'll do stuff. All these have that horizontal options. That's center. Let's test out the hot reload here. If I change these, yeah, so like it immediately updates, which is great. Because especially if it's going to take 10 minutes to load every time we do it, which I'm hoping that isn't the case. If it's going to take 10 minutes to load every time we do it, it better be able to do pretty good hot reloads so that I don't have to do that very often. So like with this, and I don't know the best way to do this. Like is there a way to just like keep this on top all the time? There might be a way in code for me to say force it, keep it in the front all the time. It's kind of annoying that like every time I switch over to here, maybe I'll just do it like this. I got enough screen space. I don't think I need these diagnostics tools right now, so I'll close that out. All right. So we've made a new Maui project. Yay. I'm going to just hijack this. I'm actually going to, well, I might want this for reference, so I'm going to hang on to it for a second, but I am going to comment all this out, and then I'm going to add in a grid. Hoping there's a grid. It looks like there is. So I'm trying to make a calculator. So let's just bring up this. Essentially, I'm trying to make something kind of like this. And so a grid seems like a good choice for building out. I don't know about these buttons here or any of this stuff up here. And I'm not even I know we're not getting to any of that right now. But just as really basic calculator. In fact, I'm probably going to leave off. I don't know if I'm going to, I don't know. Yeah, let's just see where this goes. But I'm going to set this aside. You can always open up your own calculator and compare. But I don't think I need. Okay, I got a gigantic 7 button. I don't know what just happened, but I feel like it just crashed. An error occurred while parsing XAML, unexpected token. All right, if having any syntax error crashes the program. I don't know how well it's going to work. Even still, this didn't work. It should have just. I'm just gonna delete this for now. I don't need that. I'm not. But now this gives us a chance to see how long it takes to run the second time, and I sure hope this is way, way faster than before. Because before it took 10 minutes. Okay, that's a promising sign. It's starting already. All right. And so it may not have crashed because I had a XAML error. It may have crashed because there was an error over here. But even still, hot reload's not a very useful thing if it's just going to crash on you all the time. It should see that there's a compiler error and not hot reload and tell you. All right, button. I'm not going to put these on separate lines. I'm going to keep them like this. Okay, let's see what happens now if I hit save. Okay, so I've got a grid, and like now I've got the 8 button here, and grids, you can define how many rows and columns they have, and then you can place items into the rows and columns. And again, I'm kind of winging it here because I've done things like this in WPF. I'm assuming, and we'll prove this out here in 2 seconds, but I'm assuming it works the same. So far, it feels like it's working the same. So I've got a grid, and what I want, so you can see, like, if I come in here, like this, like there's a C# class that's a grid class in the Microsoft.Maui.controls namespace. There's a class that's called grid, and my XML here is able to like define what a main page should look like, and it says there should be one of those an instance of that class in here, and you can set all of its properties. So for example, let's see if I can find an interesting one. Like I can say background equals, and then this should be a color, so I can say red. And it's hard to see because of how like the button is filling it all up. Let me, if I comment that out. Now you can see that if I set the background to red or green or, white or whatever, I get the color changing there. So I can set properties using the way that just XML always works. And the catch, though, is some properties are like they're not something that you can just squeeze the data complexity to it when you do bindings and things like that. But if you want something really complicated, like suppose you have a property here, row definitions. I actually I had this memory of a thing, and I try it out. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to still continue down the path I was going down. So, and I'll explain what I just did there in a second. But like another way you can define properties is this. So like this is an alternative for, so like even like the background, like I can say grid.background. Like I can define, my buttons are in the way again. Like I could define my background in the same way. So you can always do it this way, and if it's simple enough, you can do it the other way. And if it's simple enough, you should do it the other way because it's just way less noise. But let me go back to what I started doing here. The way in WPF that you do this is you say grid.row definitions, and then you say row definition. So now I'm like defining a whole other object, and then I have like row definitions, and then this is like it'll just stuff all these row definitions in there. This height equals star. The star is like use up. It doesn't demand like a specific amount of space, but it says use up an equal share. So like each of these, like you can see over here, like it's about a third of the, like I've got 3 rows in here and each one are taking up a third. And what I could do is I could say height is 20. And now that first row is 20, which is now really tiny. And then the other 2 are actually splitting it in half. We can't really see that yet. The other option is something called auto, which says use up as much space as you need. So now I have something where even if I had something that was taller than this, like if I made this have a height request of 200, I don't know. That height request is this tall. And so I like the name better than what WPF has, because WPF is just height, and it's not the actual height, it's how much you would like it to be. And depending on how squished the UI is or how big it is, it may be something different. And at runtime, there was another thing called actual height that you couldn't define, but is what it came out to be depending on what else. Oh, okay, maybe that's working. So this says, like, use however much space you think you need. It just kind of feels like maybe this is going off. I'm not like, I feel like there's some weird things going on with the layout that I don't totally understand, but anyway, I'm going to skip that for the moment, and I'm going to, so I can do that with row definitions, I can do it with column definitions. However, one thing I really like about this, and I just remembered as I was typing that in, is there is a short syntax where I can just do that, and that will just create 3 rows, and they're all star. So now I don't need this in there at all anymore. It makes that way simpler. That's always been one of my complaints about grids, is just the kind of the ugliness of how you define rows and columns. And let's see. Let's look at this. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows. So maybe what I need to do is 6. Six rows and 3 columns. And now, so I've got 2 buttons in here, and they're both children of the grid. They're just on top of each other. And so the way to fix that is to do grid dot row is 0, grid dot column is equals 1. I want that one to be 0, and I want this one to be 1 though. And if we're gonna, like, in truth, I actually want these not, this is row 0, row 1, row 2. So we actually want those down. And now we can do row 9. Sorry, the number 9. And that's in column 2. Oh, I need another column here. So we want 4, 5, 6. These are in row 3. Let's see. And we've got, I'm taking some shortcuts here for a moment. and we'll revisit these, but I'm trying to get the basic layout in here. So let's see, this is divide is on row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these are all column 3. We've got a few more buttons. There's a percent that I think does like divides by 100 or something. I'll have to play around with that and see. Okay. Like if we compare these, I'm some of these have special symbols, and we could probably either like use SVG to make those and just use images here. Or like define a path. Like some of these could be done with a path. There's a lot of things we could do with that, but I'm just gonna use SQRT instead of that square root button, and clear instead of that. And depending on I'm not planning on spending. I mean, it might be another hour, so we'll see. And there's more. I think there's more interesting things to get to. So, but we've got the basic stuff here. Even a lot of these symbols here, like that's not what they have here. Some of these might be pretty easy to do. I could just go look up like I just Google the multiplication symbol. Then I can find multiplication sign here or that right there. Right. And just, excuse me, just copy and paste that into here. Boop. So I could do that for some of these. Some of these are just really straight up simple symbols that exist. They're not on the keyboard, so I didn't use them. But let's get to more interesting things. So that grid is for the buttons. And I think we need to, this stuff here this is add it to the memory add, memory subtract, memory store. So this is like, you can put an 8 in here and save it. And then I can like, oh, that's not clear. That's it. In fact, these are clear. This is like a backspace. I should change that. Okay. So 5 plus, I think this is memory recall. That'd be cool to do, but what is this? I can see what's in memory. I'm gonna do nothing with that. It isn't worth it. But what I would like is this display here. So a lot of controls can't have multiple children. Like what we want is a big like text area or something for that. And it's like, you'd think you could maybe do like text block or something. I feel like something else here, maybe we deleted it already. Oh, label. I think label is what we're looking for. Label. So that's a difference from WPF, because WPF has text blocks, and I don't think they have a label. If they do, it's a more advanced thing. But text block is like just a really basic thing. So label. So you'd think like I could just stick a label here and then I'll get a label up farther. But this content page is only allowed one child. And that's what this warning here. The property content is set more than once. So this can only have one child. We've given it 2. What we need to do is make the content page have another child that can support multiple children. So for example, a stack layout. So if we put this here and do that, now let me indent this. Now we have a stack layout and a grid that has is inside of that. What's interesting about that is just how it squished everything in like that. I might actually prefer it to stretch, and there's probably a way to do that, but I don't know how to do it off the top of my head. But let's just get let's get a label in here, and in this case we should give it a name. I put this X colon. This is coming out of this right here, XML namespace thing in WP. Can I not have that? No. So you didn't need to have that X colon name to name something, but this is like this will force there to be a field that references this label instance when I'm running one of these main pages. So if I just come in here and make this thing called, what naming convention did they use? Because I know we had some of these that had a name. Okay, upper camel case. Horizontal text alignment, and okay, yeah, so that just moved it over, and I want this to be a lot bigger. Oh, good. Okay. I'm just kind of exploring here, but so I got my stack layout. I've got this label. I increased its font size, set its text alignment to the end so that it's over here. Like if I put that at start, then it's over on the left side. And since I'm kind of sort of trying to mimic this, it makes sense for it to be on the right side instead. So N shifts it over to the other side. It's actually really convenient how that hot reload has been working. Though we did have that crashed our program earlier, so your mileage may vary. All right. At this point, we actually have, in terms of UI, it honestly doesn't look that great. Oh, this padding. I don't think WPF had that at all. And or like it had it only on certain controls, and maybe that's still true. Maybe stack layout's just one that had it. I just remember padding being something that it's kind of hard to find, and what you usually end up needing to do is to make another control and put a margin on it, which everything has a margin, and the margin goes on the outside. The margin is padding that goes on the outside of a control. So I could actually come down here and I could do, I wonder what this has. So that it's like, it's kind of, there's probably a way to show. Let me just open up this visual tree. This is a fairly nice feature where I can like explore in the UI where I'm at. There's the app shell, the shell content, the main page. Like you can see how far I've gone down in here. And here's the grid. So in this case now, when I hover over grid, like you can see it's kind of subtle. And if I move the mouse to point at it, you won't be able to see it. But like there's that blue rectangle and you can see like there's spacing in there inside of the blue rectangle before all the buttons. So what would be kind of nice would be if there's some way to have just a little, I don't know. I feel like there should be a little more space between those, but maybe, I mean, like this one doesn't really have much space. Maybe not. JS, this is way over my head. Is this something that's covered in the book? This is actually beyond the book. So the C# Player's Guide is meant to be the foundation, and there's so many things you can do with C#. You can make games. A lot of people use Unity. That's the most popular choice. There's plenty of other game engines out there. There is web development, which is usually done with a thing called ASP.NET. And that, like, you can do the server side stuff, and you can like traditionally it was the back end is all C#, but the front end is JavaScript. And yeah, if you're in the web world, you just kind of like JavaScript, you just kind of need to know. But more recently with WebAssembly, like now you have the ability to like write C# code or a lot of other languages and compile it to this WebAssembly thing. And so now you like the kind of I feel like the JavaScript's grasp on the web world is weakening because now you can write C# code that runs in the browser, but even still, there's just so much web content that's JavaScript that you need to know some JavaScript to be able to do web stuff. But anyway, so web development, C# backend, and now with Blazor and you can write C# code that runs in the browser. So there's that, and then there's like desktop development, which is what I'm actually doing here, because I'm not running this on a phone right now. And that's like, I mean, like Visual Studio is desktop, like all the applications that you open, Word and Photoshop, like these are all desktop development. And then of course there's mobile app development. Maui is a framework that's supposed to be for both mobile and for desktop. And anyway, so there's just all these different like pathways you can go down, the ways you can use C# to build any type of application that you want. And each of those are kind of their own paths. Like there's a whole lot you have to learn in order to be good at any of them. And like this kind of stuff that we're talking about here, like all the XAML stuff, if you want to go down the Maui path, at some point you got to get pretty good at XAML, and you got to like learn all like the library, like what are the set of controls that are available. Like I said, I was just because I'm used to WPF and doing Maui now. My first thought was I'm going to go find a text block, but that didn't exist. Labels the alternative. And I like it feels like it's pretty much the same thing, just by a different name. And I don't like that. The name label seems pretty good to me. But anyway, like you have to know there's a stack layout. You have to know there's a grid. And these things just take time. It's a big, huge library of things that you have to learn and dig into. And that's true if you're doing Unity. Like there's all the stuff that's in the Unity engine. If you're doing Godot, like it's got its own language, its own like library, all these method calls that you have to do, all that stuff. If you're doing Maui, you got all this stuff. No matter what you're doing, there's just a gigantic pile of stuff that you have to learn for building that type of application. And all of that kind of just assumes that you look at code like this and you know what you're doing. You understand what private means. You understand what void means. You understand what event args is. You understand like what this public main page does. You understand why this goes here and not here. You understand what this namespace thing does. So it's just like, and this is even simpler than what I have long been of the opinion that when you're learning how to, like if you're sitting there saying, I want to program, I want to make mobile apps in C#. You could just like there are books out there and tutorials out there that will just say, we're going to, actually, I don't know if that's true for mobile. That one there's less content on than some of the other ones, but like there's books out there, for example, that will be like, we're gonna learn C# and Unity together, and you're gonna just learn all the things all at once. And it's just been like, that's just so much to try to tackle all at once that it's very overwhelming. And that's like, there are people who can do that. I've seen people just dive into it and they're just, learning a little bit of C#, a little bit of Unity, a little more C#, a little more Unity, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and they're able to handle it. But I feel like that's almost nobody. It's just certain people that are just like primed and ready to do it. And so that's why with my book, I said, I'm gonna, as much as I'd love to get into the app models like Maui, like Unity, like WPF, I think there needs to be something that's just the basic information that is needed for every single one of those, no matter what you do, and use the simplest. And I don't even know that Microsoft calls console apps an app model. It is like, I mean, it's a way that you could deploy applications to people, but it's a technical thing to do. There's a lot of console applications that exist out there. They're usually aimed at programmers or people that are very technical, IT people, or things like that. Like, not just everybody is going to use the command line and just run these like text only things. The thing though, like I said, is that it's really easy. Like, the amount of overhead you have to know to interact with the console window, where it's like console.writeLine, is the bar is really, really low in comparison to, I mean, like I said, the amount of stuff that's in here, even just all of this stuff and all of this code that's in here just to run a very simple program. And like I said, even just looking at a single, the simplest thing that's in here, the amount of knowledge you have to have just to really get going. It just, to me, it doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to say, start with the foundation, even though console applications are boring by comparison. Start with a simple console application, learn the basics, and then start to weave in whatever the more complicated thing that you want to do is, game development, or, desktop development, or mobile development, or web development, like whatever that thing is, you start weaving that in once you've made some progress and you start to understand things like, you've learned what private means. You know what you're looking at when you see int count equals 0. That these, even something like this, you look at that and say, yeah, I recognize that is inheritance. So when most of the, like I said, that's the thing about these is they're starting points. You make a brand new ASP.NET web thing. You make a new Maui thing. You make a new Unity project. And the code that's there to start assumes you know the basics of C#. So yes, you could like learn a little here and a little there, and like mostly just ignore everything that's in there and just say, well, I have no clue what private or void or like this object center. I don't know what that means, but all I know is that if I put code in here, then it will do it when I click. That can work. Like I said, you can do it. People do it all the time. Anyway, this has been a long, sort of rambling discussion, but that's like exactly what I want out of these like casual programming things, is more advanced than anything that's in the book, mostly because like this assumes even just this code right here, like partial classes. I'm trying to remember where that's covered. I think that might be in the advanced topics. That's like there's like a catch-all at the very end. It could be covered way earlier. It's something like that. Inheritance is like level 25 or something like that. Constructors is probably level 18. Private is like level 19 or something like that. This is an event handler, so some of this makes a little more sense. Like it's just a method, but it's a method that's being used as an event handler. So this makes more sense if you get through like the events and the delegates chapters, like, and they're like I'm picking random numbers here, but they're like 37 and 38. This int count equals 0 is like level 5 or something like that. Actually, I think it's covered in level 3. It's not just not int, it's string. So namespace is covered, like all these, like you make a new project and poof, it throws all this stuff at you and just says, well, we're going to assume you know all this. So again, I guess that's the reason I typically encourage people who are, especially people who are not just new to C#, but new to programming entirely. Like it's okay to take baby steps. It's okay to start simple. Console applications are not the most thrilling, but they are really easy to understand and not like without having a whole lot of extra overhead while you are learning things like inheritance and classes and making objects and events and delegates and you know all these other topics. So so yeah, this is if this is over your head, then well, A, I'm not surprised. B, I will say, like I've done WPF, which is similar. I haven't done Maui. I'm a little uncomfortable here myself. Like there's a lot of just little things like I don't know how to do that. So I'm figuring it out too. And that's because of this gigantic library of stuff. I have to figure out what a content page means. I don't know off the top of my head what that means. I can make some assumptions about it, and my assumptions are probably mostly correct because I've done things like it before. But there's just this pile of this library, and you got to learn that in order to work in that kind of stuff. And it's just multiple things to learn, and by just focusing on console applications, you can keep it simple. And then when you're ready, and it may be before you hit the end of the book, you may be halfway through the book and you start to say, I'm getting tired of console apps. I'm ready for something a little different, and I can live with, you know, I've done. Good question. Thanks for asking. But I was gonna say I should put this back up, but I actually don't even need it at all, so I'm just gonna delete it. Oh, okay, fine. I'll put it back, because if I don't put it back, oh, what is that? Start over. Anyway, okay. So, like I said, this is a little deep. Like I said, this is beyond what the book covers, and that's okay. If you are, say, a third of the way through the book or halfway through the book or whatever, like learn what you can, and just otherwise just think of this as just a chance to see what the future might hold. And like I said, obviously, if you're doing Unity, this type of stuff looks totally different. Like you don't use XAML to do this. Well, maybe there's a way you could use XAML to do it, but like the UI isn't typically done with XAML. Unity has a bajillion options, so I'm sure if you want to use XAML, you could. There's some plugin that would do it. All right, I lost my. Here's what we want. Now what I want to do is something kind of like what we had down here, where we just have like a click handler. And this is not, I'm going to do this, but at least in WPF land, this is not how you're supposed to do it. And so it's nice that like the autocomplete saying, well, there's an on counter click that could work. That yay button. Because I'm gonna have one of these for a bunch of things. I'm gonna actually close out these other ones. I don't need them. So button 7 clicked. All right, so I I don't love that name, button 7 clicked, because it makes it sound like it's the 7th button, not the one. I'm gonna change the name to digit 7 just because then it doesn't make it sound like it's, I don't know. I actually just I can stop this running for a second. So I've got that, and let's just do this for all these numbers. 9. And where's the 0? There's the 0. Except maybe what I want to do, now that I've got everything ordered, or now that I've got everything added to the UI, I think I want to... I want to give them a better order. Like, when you're making a grid like this, it really doesn't matter. Like, you can put them... You don't have to put them in any particular order. The grid row and grid column assigns them to their slot in the grid. And so I'm just going to order them this way so that it's easier for my mind to... And fine. And now I need a whole bunch more of these. So I'm trying to think how to best illustrate this. Maybe what I need is I kind of want to draw something, but that means I need to get my pen about it. But the MVVM pattern, it stands for model, view, view model, because those are the 3 parts. MVVM, model, view, and is like the stuff behind the scenes. This is like the underlying like business logic. And then the view, so it's M, that's the model. The view is the UI. So like this part right here, this is editing the view. This is the V part of MVVM. What you're supposed to do is in the middle of those two, you're supposed to put another thing called the view model that transforms the business layer, like the business logic, the low level, not tied to any UI, like the stuff that's like this abstract concept of whatever it is you're doing. And you're supposed to like translate that into something that closely matches the UI. So, and that thing is called the view model. The view model should be, it should just be a plain old C# class, but it should like structurally very closely mirror the UI. And that allows you to do a lot of testing without like clicking actual physical. And so as an example of that, like we could have, and maybe we should do that. Like we could have a thing, like we could have like if we just came in here and just said, I'm going to make this could be the model layer. Class. And I'm trying to think of the best way to do this, because like you almost... Like as we type in stuff here, we're making a number and then we do plus. Like the underlying model is probably going to look something like it. I'm not exactly like, maybe we should think this through if we're going to keep going down this path. The underlying model maybe needs some way to represent kind of just this, like, and like this has a comma in here. That's a UI concern. We don't need to worry about that, but we do need to worry about like some of this stuff. Like if you have a calculator and like I'm adding characters to it, at some point we gotta, I don't know. You could make an argument that some of this stuff is just a UI concern as well. And the calculator could just have simple, history and be able to do these operations. I guess I know that's the thing is I'm kind of not going down this like MVVM path because this isn't ideally suited to like we're doing something very very simple here and just clicking on buttons to do stuff is I think a reasonable approach for the short term. But like in theory, I think what you would probably do. Let's see what this has. If I make a public class. I was hoping there'd be some sort of ViewModel class, base class, but I mean, you don't have to use the same base class, but like even that's not in there. That surprises me a little. Maybe I. Is that really what I want? Maybe it is. I'm just worried because it's system.windows.input that I maybe just pulled that in from something that might not work on iOS or Android. I'm going down a weird rabbit hole here. I don't think I want to deal with this right now. But the bottom line is these like this click thing. There's other ways to do it, and for especially for applications that are getting bigger and bigger, you probably are better off learning how to do this. Keep in mind, I'm exploring this. I don't know. I like I have not studied deeply all of the rules that make Maui make for a good Maui application. I'm attempting to apply my own WPF knowledge onto it, which may not I don't know enough today to be confident that I am making the right call. So so don't use this video as this is the by the book official must be done this way kind of thing. This is an exploration. All right, let's see. So what I need before I can get too far here is, oh, and what I was going to say is that if you use those commands, that's how I got onto that. I'm remembering now. Like you can use a command that has a parameter, and then I could like basically use the same command and just pass in a different, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 for that. As it is, I'm not going to be able to do that other than I do have the sender. And I could potentially cast anyway, I'm sitting here debating like I'm gonna have to do something like digit 7 click, digit 8 click, digit 9 click, digit 0 click, like all these things, and this is just gonna be really kind of dumb. I don't like this isn't this doesn't seem ideal. But the other possibility is I could do something like let's do it this way. What I'm gonna we can consider these design choices in a second. I'm gonna do the dumb thing here. Don't need that on counter click though, and I'm just gonna do it, and we'll clean it up later. Okay, now I can do all of those. Okay, so I did, yeah, okay. So results. So I said by giving that a name, we can use it. So let's come it shows up. There it is. This is a private field. Result.text. So here we're just like manipulating. When we click this, we're just gonna manipulate another control on this same, another control on this control. All of these are controls, or maybe Maui calls it something else, but I don't think so. Anyway, this is the control, but a lot of controls have controls inside of them. That's how we build applications, is we kind of compose it. We put a grid inside of that, and inside of the grid we got all these other little things. So we're just kind of building up this like tree structure of all the controls that form our UI. And so here I'm just going to do the dumb thing and just whatever button we push, we're just going to just gonna assign whatever we pushed to that result text, which actually means at this point I could probably delete that. Probably delete all of that. Now let's run this again. It's working. So when I click on these buttons now, it calls the method that we wired up. These other ones won't do anything, but we click on these and it does the thing that we wired up, which was just that. And one thing we could do is we could make this be plus equals. Well, that took, I don't know if you guys noticed that, like I did that and then it took it a second for it to hot reload. Well, we're making progress here. So now we just append it. But I do have one concern, and that is I just want to restart this and make sure that when we start off with like empty text, it doesn't blow up. Because I don't know if it's going to be an empty string or it's going to be null. If it's an empty string, then plus equals, it should be fine. If it's null, I think that should be okay too. Because I actually think, let's see. Okay, we're good. Everything is fine. Just wanted to test that scenario. So yeah, we've like in this case now we're just like literally manipulating the text that's for result. That to me that doesn't, I don't know. I don't love that, and I think maybe we could. I don't know. There's a lot of ways we could do it. Like I said, one of the problems we've got here is it's all this like +4, +3, +2. Another thing we could do is we could do something like this and say private void digit clicked. And maybe we can call that digit button clicked. Object sender event args 3. And then maybe in here we can do like cast the sender, which should be the button. Cast it to a button. Like we're downcasting here, which is a little dangerous. It always is. Because if we ever hooked up a different thing, or if we change this to be from a button to something else, maybe our own creation, because we want to like make things look a certain way or work a certain way. So we make something that's not a button and replace these. Now this code will crash. But anyway, so there's a danger to that, but we can, so we cast it to a button, and then after doing that, so we force that to happen first by using parentheses and get its text. So this is we're hacking this. So now if we do result.text, sometimes my keyboard, I need to get a new keyboard. All right, so we cast it to a button so that we can use its text property, and then we take that and we append that to this. So now, since this text is 0, we can do that, and we can do that. We can do that for all these, except I'm not going to. But now we can delete these. The hot reload might hate us for doing that. I'm not going to trust it. I'm just going to restart it. All right. So both of those seem like they're working like you'd expect. And I only had one method. However, like this just feels super janky to me. Like this isn't the way to do it. Partly because let's suppose we wanted to, and most parts of the world actually use like these Arabic numerals, like the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, like we're seeing here. But like the text really shouldn't be just tied that tightly to this. Like that feels like a really dumb design. Like I can do this, and like that ought to work here, right? Like 1, 0. Like why couldn't I do that? Um, or why couldn't I like drop up like use a picture in here and have no text? But now it's just 0, and now it's like there's just a picture in here and it looks right. But now when I hit this, poof, I get 1, 0, 1, 1. Like this is not. This is super hacky. I don't like. It would allow us to get rid of all 9 of these. But it comes at a great cost, and I'm not willing to pay that cost. So I'm just going to put it back the way it was, and for the moment, probably just live with the idea that I'm going to have however many of these there are. A little bit more. All right, now there's a couple other buttons here that'd be super easy to do. Because I think the decimal point, it mostly works the same way, but like it has this extra, it won't let us do it. Like we can't add multiple decimal points. I think this, I think the clear button would be really easy to do as well. I have this easily. Let's see the decimal point. Decimal point clicked, and for what we're doing right now, the CE. So this is I wanted to confirm that, but like let's say I start over from scratch. This clear button resets everything. 85 times 22. Oh wait, no, that's not what I want. So I hit clear. I think it's like clear entry or something like that. Like if I clear this, like the 85 is still there, but the 22 is gone. So I meant 12 versus if I hit this C, then like the number and the operation that we were doing is also gone. It like resets everything. But for what we're doing, we're not that far along into this yet, so we actually could probably uh, do probably make all of these work pretty easily. I'm gonna call this clear entry, even though I'm not sure that that's actually what it's called. And if we hit clear, I'm just going to reset that text to empty string and clear and entry. For now, I'm going to do the same thing and back. This one's going to be a little interesting. If we click back, then what we want to do is remove the last character. So result.text result.text.substring. And we're going to start a 0 and go to we're just going to slice off one. Actually, you know what? Will that do it? I might need to do 2. That's relatively new C# syntax. All right, back clicked. What was the other one? Decimal point clicked. Because I can put multiple decimal points. However, if I hit back, it's undoing one at a time. That's what we want. That actually is. And then clear starts us over. Clear entry starts us over. Well, we have 12% of a plan. I still don't like all these things just like directly manipulating that, just the other control. And again, like I feel like so again, we're just going to explore a little bit here. I'm going to make a public class, and we started going down this path, and I backed out of it. I got too scared. Calculator. I'm going to call it a calculator VM. That VM is for ViewModel, not virtual machine. That is not an uncommon paradigm in any sort of environment that uses MVVM. They call it a VM instead of a ViewModel. Anyway, so what I want is something like this public. Let's see how this works. String current number. All right, so I'm going to make this thing, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say data context. Oh, man. All right, well, I guess I don't know what I'm doing here. Assumption that has largely been proven to be correct, but I've already seen several cases where it's not. In WPF land, you have a data context, which is the view model that sits behind the UI. And then your UI will bind to, it can bind to things in that. And you would do something like, I mean, like this has that here, binding. And then you just bind to something like, if we knew that calculator VM was the date, so the thing that's behind it is this data context, and you'd be able to do something like, if we knew that main page had a calculator VM as its view model, you'd be able to just come in here and type, well, what do they call that property? Current number. I guess I'm not sure how to tell it. Use this data context. Like, it's there somewhere. Like, there's so many hints that it's there. Maybe it's like, no, I just went through the C's. Okay, Google. Hopefully so I will say that it was probably about 6 months ago. So Maui came out in May, and it is now August. So 6 months ago, well, like several months before Maui was officially out, but when they had a bunch of previews, I tried to use Maui and it just felt like there is no documentation. Like there's like almost zero. And that made me say, I'm gonna wait until they got it. Some better documentation. It's just at a glance, there's a lot more documentation. In fact, I could probably figure out what a shell is. We were talking about that earlier. Let's see. Yeah, data binding automates this task and renders the event handlers unnecessary. With you should end up without having to do a whole bunch of like event handlers like we just did. There are better ways to do it usually. However, like I said, I made a binding, but it doesn't know. You know what? That's probably what I'm missing. It's that binding context. Let's give that a try. All right, so we set it up with that. Now, this guy probably still doesn't know that his data context is supposed to be what type his data context is supposed to be. And like there in WPF, there's a way to say like expect your data context to be of this type. And I'm not sure how to do that. I like the thing is like this can't find it, so it can't verify that that's correct. And there is a way to do it, but in all right, sorry. There is a way to do it, but at runtime, it will be there. That it'll be correct, so it'll work just fine. The catch is it's that little warning right there is going to stick around until I fix it, and I'm not going to fix it right now because, like I said, I'm running short on time. However, now instead of going to the result thing, what we can do here is go to the data context. Maybe what I'll do here is I'll do private. This way I've got just. So now I don't even have to like dig into the binding context. It's just easy access right there. And I can just say calculator VM dot number. All right. So now I don't go directly to the control and manipulate it. I'm going down into the data context, the view model that sits just behind it, and getting it to change. Now, there's one potential problem that we might see here. All right, I got a null reference exception because this is null, but it shouldn't be null. We just added this code after this object already existed. So if I just restart this, it shouldn't have that issue. That's one of the dangers of relying too much on hot reload is it can get you into states that can't normally happen. All right, let's look at this again. Okay. I was a little concerned about that, and I'm not surprised. So I click on these buttons, and I'm pretty confident it's doing stuff. Like, let's put a breakpoint in here. So that was 0. So I click 0. I hit the breakpoint. I set this, and if you look at like what I've got, like it's there. I've got numbers, but it didn't do anything else, and that is because the way that these work is the UI will respond when it's been told. You know, these bindings, it'll respond, it'll update itself when it's been told your data is different. And in order for that to work with a binding, the thing we do is we come in here and we've got to implement INotifyPropertyChanged. Probably. I can't make an assumption here. This works like WPF, or yeah, this works like WPF does. It's probably true. So I'm going to do this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to turn this into a full property. And this needs to be I want different white space. And it should have just done that for me when I put in the curly brace. Okay. Let's see. So what I need to do here is this INotifyPropertyChanged. Has this event called PropertyChanged. PropertyChanged. Dot invoke. And then we give it the sender, which is this. It's the object we're in. It's the calculator VM. And then a new property changed event args. And then we give it the name of the property. Now we could do current number. That's the simplest thing that could work here. And that should be enough to get it to work. I think. Cross your fingers. All right, let's see. Did it work? Hit the breakpoint. Yes, that looks like it worked. So in order for this to work, that's the pattern is you have this guy when you do a binding, whenever that value changes, then it needs the UI, the view needs to be notified that it has changed. There's a lot of ways we can improve this. The first one I'm going to do here is use the name of operator instead of just a string. And the difference that gives us is now if I like rename this to just current, I actually think I'm okay with that. We'll see what it does. That might be a lot, but anyway, so this name of operator ensures that like this is like a referenced code element. And it isn't just an arbitrary string, so it's a lot easier to like maintain it. Like you're a lot less likely to end up with something broken. But another thing that I'll like most of the time, and I wondered if Maui just had something like this out of the box. I just didn't see it, but we could do something like this: public abstract class ViewModel, and so just make a base class for every ViewModel, and we'll make this guy notify property changed, and we'll move this down to here, and we will need this to be protected. Protected void fire property changed string property name, And then this will just do this code here, basically. All right, so now in theory, we can do fire property changed. Pass in name of current. Gotta choose that as my base class. So it's a little bit simpler code. But we can do better. We can do even more. So let's take advantage of a couple of other C# features. And the first thing we're going to do is there is an attribute, CallerMember, that we're going to apply to this parameter. And this is a little complicated. Like this is one of those uses of, a lot of times attributes are applied to methods, the entire, like, you know, we do something like the example in the book is the obsolete attribute. Attributes, they allow you to like attach metadata to code. And then usually there are tools out there that will inspect the code, analyze it, and do stuff with it. So for example, the compiler is like the main tool that does this, but it isn't the only tool that does that. But the compiler in these cases will say, you're calling that method and it is obsolete. Like actually, we're probably getting that here. Yeah. So it gives us compiler warnings, or it could be a compiler error if we configured it right. But you can apply attributes to not just classes and methods, but like to a parameter like this right here. Again, and this is something that is information for the compiler, and it says if, so, well, let me take a step back. I've got this string with apparently this project type, and I'm a little surprised about that, but this project type apparently does not have the nullable annotations turned on. Maybe we'll just go change that really quick. I can't think of a reason why it shouldn't have that turned on. That is modern C#, and it should be on. We should have the compiler help us check for null issues. I don't know why the template doesn't have it, but there, now it does. And now this will say, okay, this can be null. And in fact, the default value is null. So if I delete this here, now what would normally happen without this CallerMemberName is it'll call this, and the compiler will say, oh, okay, I will, I see what's going on, and I will basically call it with the default value of null. But in this case, with this CallerMemberName, it says, oh, rather than pass in null, you have to have that so that it's syntactically correct, so that it doesn't flag it otherwise. But now it says if you don't pass in a parameter, if you just attempt to what would have been null, instead of null, it's going to pass in the name of the member, which is usually a method or a property. It'll pass in the name of the member that called fire property changed. So now fire property changed will fire property changed for this current property. So this is the equivalent of what we had with the name of current, and it's like you have to kind of see the pattern before you say, oh, okay, I get it, and have it kind of explained. But that pattern is so stinking common in WPF land, in Xamarin Forms, in Avalonia does the same thing. Like there's so many things, and I'm like I said, I'm assuming that this does it too. The only thing that I'm sad about is that this class didn't just exist for me, and maybe it does. Maybe it's just there somewhere, and I need to dig a little further to find it. But Anyway, so now I can just say fire property changed, and it will do that. And but by the way, I could also do something like if current number, come on, my keyboard is wigging out on me again. If current number equals, come on. It's like it misses half the keystrokes, and like maybe it's gone back to normal now. All right, anyway, so now this like, so like in this case, even though we set a value for current, it does not, even though we set a value for current, it does not, if we didn't change it, if they're the same thing, we won't fire property change. So the UI won't have to do any work in this case to do anything. Now, this is the extent, I think, of what we can really do for out of like just plain old C# stuff. There are libraries out there. Actually, that's not true, because I've seen, so this has, well, first of all, I want to actually change this to match the normal naming conventions. Okay, there's that. And there's another thing that we could do if we want to get really fancy, and that is we could do this. We could say update backing field, and then have an out, so it need to be T. So now I'm using a whole bunch of fancy C# features, but a generic method, output parameters, out T backing field T new value. Still want that. Oh, okay. I already have that, I guess. It's not out, it's ref. Sorry, I don't know what I was thinking there. But now what we can do is we can say backing field equals new value if backing field my keyboard. Now's not the time to be doing this. We use dot equals instead of the double equals. All right. This, however, needs the caller. Jeez. Easy to blame it on the keyboard, right? But it really is. All right. We've thrown every single feature in the entire C# language into this now. Only a slight exaggeration. But now, all right, now if we Now, anytime we want, now we've got all these methods that we can use in case we end up having lots and lots of things to fire property changes, and like we made that really easy. The other thing I've seen though is so speaking of attributes, I have seen there's a thing called Fody. I think it's Fody, but it might be Fodi, or Fody Weavers. That is it's like a code generator tool that is actually fairly widely used in the C# world, where you could do something like put an attribute on here that's like basically what you do is you just have like a simple property, just public string current curly braces get semicolon set semicolon, and then you just put an attribute on it that says like notify on change or something like that on it, and that thing gets a chance to run before the compiler runs, and it like modifies your code behind the scenes to have some of this stuff. Like it'll just like it injects the code, so you can make it work just by adding in an attribute, and it'll like rework your code. There's obviously a little bit of danger to code generators, but like there's a lot of value to them as well. So that's a whole other way we could do it. And I should probably handle the null case here because this could be null. And it'd maybe be something like if backing field equals null. Well, we should check that, but it's a little complicated. I don't like I really need to get going. Maybe I'll go until the hour, so I maybe got a few more minutes, but I don't want to spend my last few minutes doing that. But we should check it for null, and if the two things are null, then if the value we're trying to set and the value that's currently in there is null, then then that should be the same thing as this. But if the backing field is null and this has a value, we should proceed down. Maybe another way to write this that's like use like a static method instead. Like maybe there's like an object equals wow, that should, I think, solve it. I think that'll work. Anyway, so now the nice thing about this is, in theory, like we've got this thing, and now we can start putting logic in here to do something like, well, let's suppose somebody wants to. All right, I'm actually really hating, and now I don't know how to turn off that set. Maybe it's these settings. Like every time I make a change that can't be edited, it like comes up with the dialogue. It's like, are you sure you want to do this? And or like it was doing that, and I just said, just always reload it. And now I make all these changes, and it keeps reloading, and that's actually getting really annoying really fast. So I'm not sure I'd recommend that to people. Anyway, so we've got this current number, but now at this point we could, I mean, for example, one thing we could do is we could say, I'm not even going to. I'm not even going to have a traditional setter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have something like append digit. And we could do string, or we could do character, or we could do an int or a byte. Like we could say, look, I'm expecting you to convert this to the number that you want to append. Maybe I'll do that. And but now in this case, we need to still fire property changed. In this case, though, we can't just count on that caller member name to work for us, because the caller member name would be this append digit. Anyway, all of these now we could do append digit 0. But at this point now, it gives us a lot more options for like validating some of this stuff, because it's being routed through this view model that has, you know, methods that are smart enough to handle some of this stuff. And I think I'm not too well. I guess I am a little worried about this append digit. Like I said, it like if digit is less than 0 or digit is greater than 9, we could throw an exception. Like that seems like a programmer error. Throw new argument out of range exception. Isn't there a way to param name? There's got to be an overload of this that allows me to say it must be between actual value and must be between 0 and 9 inclusive. So if we have an issue, then we throw an exception if we're outside that range. So we can do some validation now when we append a digit. But now we could also do something like public void append decimal point. And we can say if current number dot contains 1, there's a surprising amount of complexity to just a simple calculator and decimal point. And maybe these should be like something like this. Clear. Maybe we call it clear because that's what the zero, we're just going to return early. And then here we'll say fire property changed. You know, I made a big deal about all this property stuff here, all the complexity that we did. And now we're not even leveraging most of it. Like we're not leveraging this caller member name. We're not leveraging any of this. However, pile again. And after this, I probably need to be done. Didn't get quite as far as I had hoped, but I feel like that is like a universal truth of programming. It often takes about as long as you expected. Way more often, it takes a fair bit longer. Occasionally, it takes way, way longer. And it is a rare occurrence to for something to take less time than you were expecting. It usually takes a bit longer than you thought. All right. Well, nothing's working. So let's see what's happening here. Let's see if we're getting into here. We are. Our current number has digits, and we're firing property changed. Huh. That is very interesting. I wonder if that's because it doesn't have a setter, and maybe I need to come over to here. And do a one-way binding. So most bindings are two-way. Like if you could like somehow change the label's text, it would like it'll send it back into the property behind there and attempt to call the setter. One way says don't ever set this value. Like only retrieve the value from the view model. It shouldn't be settable. Like that. I feel like that should have some sort of properties in it, shouldn't it? Like where's my font size? Where's my Let's bring the setter back for a second and see if that was the issue. Or if that's related to the issue. Like I don't want that setter there. I specifically do not want people to be able to just set arbitrary text. But it's possible that's the issue. Or that's like somehow related to the issue. It doesn't seem like it. Oh, well, that's my problem. I figured it out. Number. Here's the benefit of the name of property. Name of. It almost looks like a function, a method call, but it not quite. All right. That was my issue, not this setter. Is that the thing that I was binding to and the property I was using were didn't match. So I got a binding error, and I think if I had the right stuff, I probably could have seen that was failing somewhere. Yeah, that it was that right there. Had I had, my guess is if I went back to the way it was, I'd be able to see the XAML binding errors. All right. So now I did add a new feature. I can now put a single decimal point. I don't think I could do that before just because the logic wasn't in there. Huh. That C and CE aren't working, so clear must not fire the property. That is the kind of thing that, like, when you're first learning how to do this type of thing, that seems to always bite you. Forgetting to fire property change. So that's usually the first thing you should go to. Now that's working, so. All right. Maybe I'll continue this another day, but for now I got to be done. I've got other things to do today. But I feel like I've got, probably easily 10 times more experience with Maui than I had before. It does have quite a few similarities with WPF, but there's some notable differences too. I feel like to finish this calculator, I'd probably have to spend 10 times more time on this. There's just enough little things to learn, and I'm not in love with this like purpley color, but that's like the Visual Studio color. I'm sure that's why they picked that as the default. Is got to pick some color. Why not? Why not the branding color for Visual Studio? Anyway, yeah, that's so we've done some really basic stuff. Talked through a bunch of kind of the main like basic like fundamental concepts of some of this stuff, but I don't know that we at this point have really seen a lot of great examples of some of it. Like I think we need to build quite a bit more to like really see it. So it'd be fun to do more. I don't know when I'll have time for another round of this, and maybe when I do, there will be other things I'll want to work on instead. But I do have a bunch of XAML. Sorry, I have a bunch of apps that I'd like to make or a couple of them are remake, modernize. And I have been for a long time hesitant to remake them in WPF just because WPF, like it's gotten updates, but they're mostly like bug fixes or security fixes. Like it doesn't feel like it's a thing that's like has a lot of life left in the future. It might, like I said, they did drag WPF into the .NET Core era. They said we're going to support this. It's still going to be Windows only, while most of .NET can run cross-platform. So maybe Maui is meant to be that cross-platform thing. And I've had several little complaints. Despite the complaints, I haven't seen anything that to me feels like a deal breaker either. But just more learning that I'm going to have to do myself. So, but yeah, I've got several apps that I'd like to do, and it'd be really nice to have these apps and be able to have them as a Windows app, and for a lot of them to be able to run them as a mobile app too. So anyway, plenty more learning to do here. But it's probably time to end this. We're over 2 hours. So thanks guys for joining me. It's been fun, and I will see you next